Hello again, here today in the Tier 8 Premium American aircraft carrier, the USS Saipan. We're on the map Haven, and the mode is Domination. We're in 6 to 7 matchmaking, so we are middle tier, and we're against an enemy Kaga. Now a lot has changed since I last reviewed the Saipan for the channel on patch 0.8.4. We're now on patch 0.8.81, so the anniversary patch, plus hotfix. And so since 8.4 we've seen an AA rework, a sector rework, plane health changes, and all that jazz. So that's a lot that's gone on to change the state of the Saipan. All in all, we went through a few patches where AA was very strong, during which the Saipan was difficult to play. Not impossible obviously, but still relatively difficult, since her planes suffered very greatly from the AA switching from being spread over an entire squadron to focusing down just one plane. New sector system softened the AA somewhat, which is obviously a boon for a carrier with a small squadron size such as the Saipan. However, she still suffers from having low deck space and relatively long regen times. There's also been a couple new lines introduced, so the French destroyers have been added to the game, as well as the full implementation of the Russian battleships. Fortunately for the Saipan, she's relatively still effective against both of these new lines. The French destroyers lack a smokescreen, and because the Saipan packs HE dive bombers and tiny Tims on her rockets, she doesn't care so much about Russian armor. So as a result, nothing really changes in terms of her relative effectiveness other than learning AA. French destroyers don't really have AA, and outside of the Kremlin, the Russian battleships don't have that much AA either. So still, relatively speaking, smooth sailing. Looks like the majority of my team is moving along this flank, so I will follow along. There were a couple patches where carrier AI was a bit broken. It's since been mostly fixed, so though I still have some qualms about it since you can't reverse very well. Fletcher does smoke himself into the cap, which means he's bow in, kind of right in front of me. He's got a brief glimpse of him there. I'm gonna get a wide spread as we get onto his broadside, so he's angled like that. Oof. Okay, we do find the enemy flying over a bit of flak, but I'm gonna tough it out so I can blind drop this Fletcher, who's somewhere inside of this. Oh, okay, so now we know exactly where he is due to him shooting. Unfortunately, we did drop a bit early, relatively speaking. We do hit him, however, with our anticipatory drop. Sorry about that small lag spike. Mogador shows himself on the map. As I was mentioning, the Mogador is a French DD, in this case the Tier 9, has essentially no anti-aircraft capabilities whatsoever, so I'm going to go harass him. All he has on his side is speed, but aircraft rockets don't really care. Just maneuvering to get into position. Mogador should be like here. Oh, he turned around. Now note that even though I let him a little bit, he did manage to evade a lot of my ellipse in terms of aiming because of his high speed. Did catch him on the end there, and I hit him quite hard due to his large size. All of the French destroyers are more destroyer leaders than destroyers in terms of design, which means they are very large in size. So this time I'm going to lead him a fair bit more. Normally that would be too forward, but notice how, in his case, those only strike him on the midsection, even after leading a full ship length in front, in spite of the fast travel time of the Tiny Tim rockets. I'm going to launch the high explosive dive bombers. Now the high explosive dive bombers have suffered somewhat over the past few patches. They saw the .84 nerfs, which I did cover that time. And in addition to that, they received some further hit point nerfs along with the midway, because they are the midway's BTDs. They suffered some hit point nerfs. So they're a bit more fragile than they used to be, which is a pity because the high explosive dive bomber certainly used to be the primary armament squadron for the midway and for the Saipan as well to a certain extent, although the Saipan's torpedo bombers are quite a bit more powerful. Notice here I'm going to have to pop my speed boost just to make sure I can get ahead of him. Unfortunately, my bombs do straddle, dropping from quite a high altitude. We do have enough airplane health, however, to bring us around for another pass. The Sovietsky Soyuz overlapping his AA with the Mogadors get quite close before I initiate the drop pattern. As my planes get red, I'm just going to drop now just to maximize, and we do score 2 bomb hits for a satisfying 4K. Gonna hunt for the Fletcher again, not full up on any squadrons yet. Torpedo bombers almost regenerated, so we are going to plan to launch those next. Gonna keep up with the fleet. We have a cap disadvantage, but I cannot fix that myself in the current circumstances. Our Mogador over here should probably take B. It's clear for the most part. Oh my god. Okay, where's my B wheel? Need them to capture the area, which apparently you can't do with the B wheel. Oop, sorry about that. Apparently I switched my keyboard up by accident. I'm gonna screen for the Fletcher. Oh, that Mogador down there is splitting from the pack. I'm gonna screen for the Fletcher for my remaining ships here. He should be about here is my anticipation. I'll deal with the Mogador after I recall. That or he's headed inside. I'm undetected, huh? So he's not inside. He may have turned or just straight up turned around from the looks of it. Well, in that case, I'm gonna expend my rockets. I am here all the way after all. The Tiny Tims have no trouble penetrating the 38mm midsection of the Massachusetts. I'm just gonna F out there. Not the most optimal, obviously. I am inside AA, but I'm more focused on saving time than anything else. Mogador's fairly low. Missouri's in a pretty good spot to hit. So I'm gonna, oh, my Mogador, wherever the heck he did, he found the Fletcher. So apparently he traveled all the way over here. Anyway, I'm expending these onto the Missouri or Donskoy, so I'm just gonna pre-drop. Pre-dropping is still very critical in the Saipan due to her small reserves. And I'm anticipating finding the Missouri here. It's not quite at the angle I'd hoped for. I'm gonna pop my heel and see if I can't adjust that anyway, though. Unfortunately, we do lose an aircraft on the way in. It looks like I'm gonna nail him with one, though. And we do flood him, and looks like he's gonna turn into that one as well. Yep, so our dive bombers are the most healthy squadron at the moment. We do need a cap back. That Sovietsky should be under fairly intensive fire. Donskoy's gonna die. I would cap myself, but I'm liable to get spotted and shot at by that squadron. Over there. Wow, his fighter, is he just popping his fighter on cooldown for fun or something? I would have thought it would have expired by now. Maybe he thought I might go for him with the torpedo bombers earlier. Okay, his fighter's down to 1. Getting shredded by allied AA. Nope. We do enter into the overlapping AA sector of the Missouri. Let's duck out of that. Don't want to take any extraneous damage. And note that while I'm over the Sovietsky Soyuz, she doesn't have that much in the way of AA. Looks like my teammates are going to finish her. So I'm just going to... Oh, I'm just gonna slingshot onto the Mogador, which I'm spotting incidentally. I'm gonna hover him for as long as possible, but really my intention here is to just spot him from allies. I do manage to skim him though, so he will bite the dust. And at this point, we really need these caps even though we're murdering them, so I'm gonna move right in, assuming that I can hide behind this piece of cover over here. Is my heal up? My heal is not up. Well, there's only one Missouri here, so I'm gonna go with a full squadron. Now, the BTD has a very long lead up, or wind up time, if you prefer, on her torpedo bombers, so you do want to arm out as far out as possible. Arming at 7 kilometers is honestly optimal. Gonna ram my face through some flak here, which is not optimal. Looks like he's slowing down from flooding. I did lose a torpedo bomber on the way in. Looks like he's dead here, so I'm gonna F out and relaunch. And he does die. Now, unlike the Midway's torpedo bombers, which only hit for 4.4k each, the Midway torpedo bomber still hits for full damage, more or less. Much closer to 6,000 damage in comparison. And because there's only 4 planes in her BTD torpedo bomber squadron, you get a much narrower spread, as you saw there. I'm gonna go after the York. He does have a fighter in the air currently. Stay back, CV, bite me. You can see all the enemies here, the carriers here, so as long as I shield myself from this direction, I should be relatively safe to engage. It's gonna be a bit of an awkward slingshot here. I'm rather close, but because I'm gonna maneuver, it's not a straight slingshot, I'm able to do it even though I'm quite close. And now I end up right on top of him, kind of using the turn distance to make sure it shortens. The landing does, however, kill the target I was going for, so I'm gonna have to just accept that I was wasting my time there. That leaves Gneisenau and the Massachusetts. Now, the Gneisenau is a better target, but the Massachusetts is in a better location, so I'm gonna go for the Mass. Drop myself and the Duke of Joka fighter, just in case, you never know. And I'm gonna vector in towards CCAP, passing this way in order to stay in cover as much as possible. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm gonna initiate the drop at 7 kilometers to get the spread as nice and tight as possible. Now you can get the spread pretty darn tight, as you can see. Drop a little early. I don't have the correct angle, he's turning in to match me, but this should ensure that I land the majority of my torpedoes. And I do manage to scratch him for 3 torpedoes, and now I can just hit him in the butt with the last 2. Or force him forward, either one is fine. And he is forced forward. My carrier is reversing because of the way in which I beached myself behind cover in order to protect myself. My team cleaning up the other caps, even though we're still fairly even on points. This is due, of course, to the cap deficit that we were holding for a large portion of the game. Pretty conservative damage total so far. Did not get the opportunity to farm GDs or farm BB HP that much, mostly hitting destroyers. Harassed that Mogador for a fair amount of time. Went after some targets which ended up dying. But you'll note that I've been able to field full squadrons for basically the full duration of the game as a result. So had this been a game where okay, that was an interesting straddle. The dive bombers are a bit finicky with skinnier targets, particularly stuff like this Ibuki, for example. Oh, don't want to fly that way. So I did want to correct my course earlier, but that flak puff kind of spoiled that plan. My plane's kind of getting low on health, only 2 bombs left. Do manage to at least score 1 hit. He's healthy enough and not getting shot at by too many targets where I think I'm going to go with the torpedo bombers. If he were a bit lower and I was concerned that I wasn't going to get my damage in, I probably would have went with the rocket planes. Let's see if we can't squeeze out an extra 10k damage. Popping my engine cooling consumable just to get some use out of them. I'm pretty conservative with them so far. Oh, and the John Bart does overmatch him. Now, torpedo bombers are a great armament to use against carriers in general, but committing a full Saipan squadron is not ideal. His defense fighter is going to trim, in this case, up to 5 aircraft, so it would be better if I just attacked with only 4. So perhaps I should have considered pre-dropping that squadron that I initially meant for the Ibuki. So these are all going to die, unfortunately. Dropping a fighter to feed him experience, basically, because these aren't going to do anything. As you can see, it trimmed all 4. We did take 2 torpedoes, just shy of our damage goal, unfortunately, and he's going to die before we can get to him, even with the fast Bearcats. But a pretty straightforward game. You can see it was kind of a stomp. We lost 4 ships, they lost their whole team. Nice screenshot of the Bearcats' rear as we wrap up the match. Nice and gentle matchmaking. Not throwing us against any particularly heavy AA threats. Oh, this is a long load. Well, and it skipped my loading screen, and it decided to rent me a Mikasa because of the World of Warships stream. Thank you very much. Well, been struggling in the Flint, not because the games are that bad, but because my teams are making it difficult. Anyhow, back to the Saipan. Let's stay focused here. 88,000 damage, 11 torpedo strikes, 4 bomb hits, 3 hull interdictions, 3 fighter interdictions, 8 incapacitations, 2 kills, 4 fires, 2 floods, 1 defended ribbon, and a assisted capture. And last but certainly not least, 12 rocket strikes, all of which penetrated thanks to the Tiny Tim's enormous penetrative power. Base experience wise, second on the team, just below the Atago, which seemed to have been able to do lots of work on the flank we weren't on. And go to the detailed report. The larger chunks of my damage come from the battleships, but we do have a substantial amount of damage onto destroyers, 17,000 in fact. And distribution-wise, I actually did more damage with rockets than with bombs. I did go use the HE dive bombers to go after destroyers, which is not the most easy thing to do on the Saipan, because unlike the Midway and Lexington, she only drops 4 bombs per pass. And thanks to the lower bomb density, or munitions density, she does have a propensity to miss bombs, especially with the size of the ellipse. So Saipan, you're using the Azure Lane port, it's nice and well lit, and you can get a good look at the entire ship. So nothing's changed in terms of the Saipan's air group. She still has her same 11 aircraft of each, and attack flights of 6. The HE dive bomb nerf, however, has meant that she leans more on her torpedo bombers than her HE bombers compared to before. The HE dive bombers are still very, very potent against American destroyers if you can get them to land, but it is rather difficult to get more than 1 or 2 bombs to land consistently now, and frequently you will straddle targets entirely, as you saw with that last strike on the Ibuki. It looked like the strike was pretty good, maybe a bit under-led, but what ended up happening was that all 4 bombs dispersed onto either side of the Ibuki, leading to a rather disappointing drop. She does, however, still have her torpedo bombers to lean on, so this is the same plane as the Tier 10 Midway, the BTD. However, it has a bit less health because the Saipan is a Tier 8, so she does not have access to the Slot 6 module. However, unlike the Midway, her torpedoes hit for a whopping 6.4 thousand per torpedo. And with 4 of these torpedoes, this gives her a theoretical alpha of just about 25,000 damage. In comparison, the Midway launches 6 torpedoes on her BTDs. However, as I've mentioned many times before, her torpedoes only hit for 4,200. Which means that she has a theoretical alpha of just about 25,000 as well. But this involves you hitting 6 rather than 4 torpedoes on a much wider spread. And the wider spread means that the focus of the cone narrows much more slowly compared to the Saipan. And it looks like the plane health was nerfed on the Midway but not on the Saipan, is that right? Wow, okay, that's interesting. So 2,451 on each side. Okay, I'm learning as I learn with you guys. Did I buff my torpedo bombers? It might be a module difference. I might have torpedo bomber health. Let me check. Okay, so that's why. So on the Midway, you still tend to lean on your HE dive bombers, but on the Saipan, you lean on the torpedo bombers. So I switched over to TBM2 in slot 4, and that explains the difference in health between my torpedo bombers on the Saipan and the torpedo bombers on the Midway. But anyhow, that was the Saipan. Bit of a re-review since several patches have passed. She's still a very, very strong ship. You just have to manage your squadrons carefully, pick targets carefully. General carrier advice, essentially. But even more so because you can't afford to take any plane losses. But she's still perfectly functional. AA changes come and go, but most of the premium carriers, outside of perhaps the Graf Zeppelin, are in a pretty good state still very strong. And that's that. Cheers.